Lady from the 57th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I've been doing this job, 6 months now? Before this, I worked for a private paper company. I was an independent consultant. I worked for the Girl Scouts. That's right, the Girl Scouts, a trans-inclusive organization. When I was elected to state government, I thought I would be here solving actual problems. I thought I would be working on things like the previous speaker, the representative from the 71st. She has a bill that would allow municipalities to eliminate single-use plastics. Haven't seen that anywhere. How about education? Her seatmate, the representative from the 14th, just circulated a bill to increase the amount of summer school FTE that can be counted for revenue limit purposes from 40 to 100. That seems like a great idea. So imagine my confusion that I arrived here to be talking about this bill that the representative from the 38th introduced, which is addressing a non-problem. It's not unusual. 20 states have legislators who've introduced similar bills. In fact, the representative noted in committee that hers was modeled on one from Montana. And yet, none of them can cite a single instance in their own state or district where transgender youth participating in sports that match their gender identity has caused any problems. There's no epidemic of transgender girls dominating female sports. In fact, the National Collegiate Athletic Association and the International Olympic Committee and other amateur and professional sports leagues have had long-standing policies that allow trans athletes to compete according to their gender identity. Now, the Olympics policy has been trans-inclusive since 2004, but not one single openly transgender athlete has yet to even qualify. California passed a law in 2013 allowing trans youth to compete on a team that matches their gender identity. There have been no issues. There is no dominance of transgender athletes stealing scholarships or medals. Let's talk about mental health for a second here. Claiming transgender girls have an unfair advantage in sports also neglects the fact that these kids already have the deck stacked against them in nearly every other way imaginable. They suffer from higher rates of bullying, anxiety, depression, all of which, newsflash, make it more difficult to train and be competitive. There are also higher rates of homelessness and poverty because of common experiences of family rejection to this community. This is probably why you haven't seen any Olympic athletes. Imagine trying to train and compete when you have no place to live. So attempts to force transgender girls to play on boys' teams are really unconscionable attacks on an already marginalized population of young people, and they don't address a problem. They would cause serious mental health damage to both cisgender and transgender youth. During the height of the pandemic, many of you in this room were talking about, we must open schools, the mental health of our young people is at risk, suicide rates are going through the roof. I even had a conversation with my representative to the South in the 55th, a nurse practitioner with her own vibrant practice, about her concern for the high incident of suicides. I know she cares about the young people in Wisconsin, and yet I see she signed on to this bill. These bills cause harm. The medical community has an oath, first do no harm. I'm beginning to think that Wisconsin politicians need to take a similar oath. Beyond the possible trauma of gender verification exams, these bills would cause further emotional damage. Though this might be hard for you to understand, I want you all for one moment to imagine you're back in school, in college, and somebody is asking you to play on a team of a gender that is not yours. You would be miserable, you would be confused, you might cause self-harm. Remember that we have not seen an epidemic of transgender girls dominating sports leagues, but we have seen an epidemic in higher rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide. Research shows that one of the major drivers for mental health problems is rejection of someone's gender identity. Forcing trans youth to play on these sports teams that don't match this will make it worse. According to the Trevor Project, there was actually a reduction by more than 70% by people whose pronouns of choice were being used and correct names were being used. Additionally, teen suicidal ideation decreased by 35%, and suicide attempts decreased by 65% simply by using the right gender. So what do you think these bills are going to do to these mental health outcomes? I know that this bill allows for a supposed out, I think some of you are using, to hide behind false inclusivity, saying that you're legislating room for a transgender league. Give me a break. We have a hard enough time already supporting 2 leagues. We have already learned that separate is not equal, and already underfunding our schools, and professionally, women's teams consistently have to deal with fewer accolades, less press coverage, and lower pay. So what do you think a transgender sports league is going to face? If we really truly care about women's sports issues, we should be working on closing the pay gap in women's sports. We should be making investments in sports and promoting equal economic opportunities for these girls and women. We should promote a bias-free and equitable representation in our media. But that is not what these bills are about today. You're not protecting anything. So the big question is, why are we here? Why are we discussing this and wasting time on the floor? We know the governor will veto this. You know that your Democratic colleagues will sustain any override attempts. Nobody is clamoring for this legislation. You are playing to your base to score political points. This is political theater, which has turned into an exercise in cruelty and harm for young people and children in the state of Wisconsin. Those who vote yes to support these bills, I firmly believe, should be ashamed of themselves. I'm getting to know many of you, and honestly, as people, I like many of you. And I don't want to have to change my opinion of you based on your vote today. I am new enough that I still hold some optimism that people in the end do the right thing, that there's some heart and compassion, and that when you vote, you will think of the children that you might potentially be harming, and that you will do the right thing. So I'm asking you, don't kill that last glimmer of hope I have after 6 months here. Do the right thing today. Voting yes on this is to do harm. And if that is your choice, as I said before, you should be ashamed of yourselves. Thank you.